Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede. I hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving with plenty of food on the table. Later in the show, we'll talk about those who are struggling to keep their families fed and what you can do to help. But first, last week, I spoke to Miami State Representative Danny Perez, who became the 90th Speaker of the Florida House. Now, Republicans do enjoy supermajorities in both the House and the Senate in Florida, which means they can pass anything they want. Or to put it another way, they can pass anything the governor tells them to pass. Of course, as the governor enters his final 2 years in office, we'll see if Republicans will be willing to stand up to him. Democrats in Tallahassee will have their own role to play, and this week I spoke to the Democratic leader in the Florida House, Fentrice Driskell, to get her perspective on what Democrats can do.
We understand our role, which is to be the party of opposition. It's to push for transparency and accountability. But accountability doesn't mean being the party of no. Accountability also means offering thoughtful ideas and solutions if there's a way that we can help make legislation better. And what I offer to my colleagues is that when you hear us debate you, when you hear us push back, don't necessarily look at that as just we're trying to be obstructionist. We're trying to speak out and speak out for the millions of Floridians who voted for us and the millions of Floridians who are in their districts who maybe don't agree with the Republican majority. We're trying to speak up for them in the best way that we know how. So are we in the minority? Yes. Are we in the super minority? Sure. Do I understand how vote counts work? Absolutely. But I also know that we have a role to play, and we cannot shrink from that just because the numbers may not be on our side.
I know in talking to you, there's a little bit of concern, and you heard it in Danny Perez's speech when he was installed, when he talked about we're not a debating society, where, it's not a place for words, it's a place for action. That sounds good, but there's sort of a subtext of that I know concerns you, that there's going to be a limitation on debate, that as Democrats, you're going to be confined into how the points that you can raise, the questions that you can ask, those sorts of issues. How concerned are you by that?
I'm very concerned by that because the trend these past few years has been to curtail debate. So when I was first elected 6 years ago, the opportunity to debate was probably the strongest tool in the minorities' toolbox. Because if you needed to, you could take as much time as you needed to in debate. You could ask the questions that you needed to debate. And by the way, that's not just about hearing yourself talk. Oftentimes that's eliciting important testimony on the record that could later be used in lawsuits, because a lot of what the legislature passes, the Republicans in the legislature, a lot of what they pass later gets found to be unconstitutional. But you need to understand the legislative intent, which means there needs to be questions asked. So I was actually very concerned about the remarks during the speech, because I don't know how much more they can curtail debate. They took it from it being an amazing tool for the minority to now we have structured debate. They told us when we moved to structured debate that they would work with us and make sure we had all the time we needed. But what really happens behind the scenes are a lot of conversations that are take it or leave it. So I'm very concerned about that, us not having the ability to truly speak up for Floridians in the way that we're intended as the minority party.
Well, let's take a step back for a second. Obviously, you served as minority leader in the last session of the House, and you're moving forward this time as well. What is your relationship with Speaker Perez? Do you talk? Is there any plan, for instance, to having regular meetings with the Speaker? Since you're the Democratic leader, I mean, how does that work? Is there regular communication between the two of you?
Yeah, actually, Danny and I enjoy a great relationship. We were both on the Judiciary Committee as freshmen, and that's where we formed our initial bond. He joked about it even in his speech, that oftentimes we'd go 12 rounds, but we'd still emerge from it able to respect each other. I know him to be a man who cares very much about his values. I'm a woman who also cares about mine. We're both very principled people. And so I think that we'll have a good working relationship. I find it easy to get in touch with Danny. If I reach out to him, he usually hits me back really quickly. So I think that's also important. I've learned that as leader, that it's important to have a good relationship with the speaker so that you can lead your caucus and make sure that they get the things that they need. So I would anticipate that we would have continue to have good communication going forward.
Where are some of the areas you think that there is room to work with Republicans that they may want to work with Democrats on? Are there certain issues that you see commonality on?
Yeah, well, there's some areas of the law where we've been able to have great bipartisan cooperation. Some of that is in criminal justice reform. So I'd like to see what can happen there. There were some of the remarks that Speaker Perez made during his speech about not being beholden to the property insurance companies anymore. We know that property insurance is a top issue for many Floridians, or I should say that their inability to afford property insurance and the inability to hold property insurers accountable. So I would imagine that if there's some good solution-oriented work that the speaker wants to do around property insurance, he would find friends in my caucus to work on that in a bipartisan way. So, being in the superminority does not mean that all is lost. What it basically means is that we don't get to drive the train or, drive the vehicle. And that's not how I would like it. I would much rather that we were the ones in charge. But to the extent that we can find good partnerships and work across the aisle, we'll totally do that. I'm willing to work with anybody who's willing to work with me.
So tell me what your Democratic priorities are for the upcoming session.
So the Florida House Democrats believe that every Floridian deserves the freedom to be healthy, prosperous, and safe. If you look at our policy platform over the past couple of years, Jim, you won't find a single culture war. What we are focused on is the economic prosperity of our people, being healthy, prosperous, and safe. That means access to high quality, affordable healthcare through Medicaid expansion. That means lowering property insurance rates by making sure that we're holding these property insurers accountable and looking at solutions that are not just giveaways to the property insurance companies, but real ways to help improve the market and bring the prices down for consumers. And safety. Gun safety is still a big deal in our districts. Floridians want this. People did not want the permitless carry bill that happened. They want to live in communities where they don't have to be afraid to send their kids to school so much. And so we need to look at common sense solutions to that, not necessarily talking about removing a gun from the hand of a lawful gun owner, but things like safe storage laws, things like looking at making sure that there's proper training for these firearms so that we can reduce some of these deaths.
And let's talk briefly about Amendment 4. It received 57% of the vote. To me, that was a clear sign that the vast majority of Floridians believe the 6-week abortion ban is too extreme. I think that a lot of misinformation was put out there with regard to, whether or not it would do away with parental consent, which is what kept it under the 60% mark. But clearly, I guess I'm less likely to believe that while this governor is in office, he would allow any legislation to move the 6-week back to 12 or 15 weeks in light of the election. But I wanted to get your reaction. Do you think that we could see any type of reform with regard to abortion in the state?
I do think we really need to have a conversation to give doctors the clarity that they need. Let's just start there, right? Because there are a lot of medical professionals who are afraid for losing their licenses and are not providing the critical care that women need. But on the political front, what type of leader celebrates that he used deceptive and desperate practices to defeat more than half of the voters in his population? What type of leader is that? Let me tell you something, Jim, that's not a leader, okay? The governor used taxpayer dollars, your dollars and my dollars, to fight against Amendment 4 and to frankly put a lot of information out there that was bad, that was misleading. And he celebrates this as a victory. To me, in my mind, this is not a victory. And of course, who loses? The majority of Floridians who voted for it. And then the women who frankly are now put in this situation that they can't get the care that they need. And most women don't even know that they're pregnant at 6 weeks. So this is another one that I hope, another ballot initiative that I believe we would see again in the future. Even if this governor is reticent to do anything about it, the people of Florida want something done about it. I think it's a very difficult legislative climate to get anything done in terms of changing the time frame. But one area where I hope we could have some conversation at least would be to give doctors clarity. And then I think as a people of the state, we need to come back with another ballot initiative because it's clear that the Republican majority is not going to listen to the people, and that is not okay.
The one area that I spoke to Speaker Perez about last week was on the issue of condo reform. He obviously was the person who sponsored the legislation in the House after the Champlain Towers, tragedy. I know that there has been a lot of concern, especially down here in South Florida with some of the tall buildings. I'm sure you're hearing from constituents on it as well. When it comes to the costs associated with these new assessments that are coming to light now, 2 years past the Champlain Towers accident, the cost to them to have to upgrade and do those things that are necessary to come into compliance. My conversations with Speaker Perez is that he's reticent to make any changes because his argument, and I'll make it as well, is that me personally, my roof was in bad shape. I just had to spend $30,000 to put a new roof on my house. I knew it was something I was going to have to take care of. I put money aside, and I now have a new roof. I'm not asking the state for anything. And so I think it's that sort of trying to weigh the two things. Do you have families and older residents who are in condominiums who have huge assessments that they can't afford versus how is it fair to really give them some sort of break, whether it's a low interest or no interest loan? I realize I'm sort of asking you a complicated question, but where do you see the condo question in terms of reforms? Do you think that's going to be taken up, and what suggestions do you have as to what might be done about it?
Yeah, well, I think to understand where we are, we have to understand how we got here. And I think Floridians need to be reminded of who has been in charge all this time. You've had the Republicans in charge of both chambers in the legislature and the governor's mansion since 1998. That's important to understand because what's happened is that there's been practically no regulatory framework for what has been happening with these condos. And you had all these requirements to continue to be lax, and it was possible for these associations to kick the can down the road. And now we're at a point of crisis. It's the same thing with the property insurance crisis, right? Like these property insurance companies have been allowed to do what they want, to not be held accountable, and now people can't afford it, and we're at a time of crisis. So we need to understand, I just wanted to make that point, how we got here. And so now to tell people, these condo owners, that they have to pay these assessments when that's not the culture that they've been living in. These are not the requirements that they've been living with. I read just the other day, looking at the census data from 2020, we have more Floridians in poverty than the national average. If the national average is around 11% or so, there's over 12% of Floridians who are in poverty. We know that, yes, while there are probably some very wealthy landowners who have beautiful condos on the beach, a lot of the folks who are in these condos are retirees or people on fixed income or people who maybe could not afford a single family home. And so I don't think it is fair to them for the state to now completely flip the switch and not offer them pathways to be able to continue living in their homes. I think that offering something like a low interest loan, I don't think that that is a handout, because that's something that has to be repaid as best as they can over time. And I think we need to be looking at creative solutions like that so that we keep people housed where they are, particularly for our senior citizens.
When we come back, we will talk to the CEO of Feeding South Florida, talk about its efforts to help those struggling to keep food on the table. Stay with us. Welcome back. As I said at the top of the show, I do hope everyone had a good and bountiful Thanksgiving. Although I'm sure for many folks, there may have been a little less on the table this year. More and more families in South Florida are struggling, and among those out there trying to help, Feeding South Florida does a remarkable job of providing food to those in need. I spoke to the CEO of the organization, Paco Velez, about what they're doing.
Well, Jim, as you mentioned, families are struggling. Rent and the cost of housing has also gone up for families. On a regular day, it's pretty difficult for them to put food on the table, and for a holiday, it's been difficult as well. This past Thanksgiving, we distributed more than 12,000 turkeys and all the fixings for families so they can have a happy Thanksgiving. But it's incredibly difficult with everything, with the cost of everything going up. Even the storms that affected a lot of the farms here in Florida have either pushed the harvest back or have increased the cost because there's not enough produce coming out of the state of Florida. So all these things combined are really putting our families are really feeling the pinch and are struggling to make ends meet because of the cost of living here in South Florida.
So give me, you talked about 12,000 turkeys for the Thanksgiving that we just had. On an average week, even without the holidays, what do you What are you giving away? What are you helping families with? What's the need out there that you're seeing on just a week-to-week basis?
On a week-to-week basis, I can tell you what goes out of our warehouse every single week. Every week, we're distributing almost 2 million pounds of food that goes out of our warehouse into the four-county area: Palm Beach, Broward, Miami-Dade, and the Keys. So 2 million pounds a week. We're looking at 8 to 9, almost 10 million pounds of food that goes out every single month, and that's serving about 1.2, a little more than 1.2 million individuals in the four-county area. And not only is it feeding 1.2 million people, and it's not a one-time thing. Some of the families are coming to us multiple times a month just because it's become a way to keep food on the table as they have to pay utilities and have to pay rent, have to pay their car, just everything, all the cost of living that's gone up.
And this is sort of supplemental. This isn't intended to feed them for in perpetuity. This is more just trying to fill in some of the gaps that they might not otherwise have. You know, to the best of your knowledge, do you have a sense for how many people are skipping meals, how many people are going hungry in South Florida? Do you have any understanding of what the problem is out there and how serious it is?
We do talk to a lot of seniors. We have a home delivery program for older adults, and we provide either grocery boxes or prepared meals, and they go out in refrigerated trucks, and we talk to the seniors. And before we get them onto the program, we interview them. We do an intake process, and our seniors are skipping meals to a pretty incredible degree. Sometimes they'll only eat once a day, if at all. We have talked to some seniors who would prefer to feed their cat or their dog before they eat on their own, or prefer to buy cat or dog food and then start to eat that cat or dog food just because they want to make sure they're taking care of their pet, because it's a lot of times their only companion. So we bring on these older adults, and we provide that home delivered food to them along with wellness checks, and our drivers act as another companion, a way to engage socially with someone else. So the need is pretty great among our older adults. We're seeing a lot of issues with our families as well, where the families or the parents are rationing food, especially when you have a single mother. She's rationing food for herself to ensure that her kids are eating every single day. It's an unfortunate situation, and something you think would not happen here in this country, but it happens a lot more than you think.
So let's talk about two things. One, let's start with, if somebody is in need, how do they get in touch with Feeding South Florida? Do you have storefronts? Is it a matter of going online? Are there phone numbers? Talk to me about how a person would be able to, if they feel they need some help, how would they be able to get it from you?
We want to be accessible to anyone who needs assistance, and we want to make it okay for people to ask for help, regardless of what that help is. But here for us, help with food and help with other resources, we want people to be okay with asking for that assistance. They can go to our website, feedingsouthflorida.org, look up our agency network. We also have our pantries here and in our Boynton facility, where folks can come in. Our pantry is open in Broward, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday. We extended those hours to make sure families who are working can access the pantry. We're also open on Saturdays, 8 to 5, so people can access the pantry. They can call us 954-518-1818 and make an appointment, or let us know that they're coming in so we can help them. A lot of ways to get assistance. We don't just help people with food. We help them with the federal benefit applications, so SNAP or food stamps, Medicaid, long-term care, children's health insurance program, different WIC referrals, all these things that we help families with, along with life skills like financial literacy, computer literacy, resume writing, and workforce training. We help families with the workforce training program, especially warehouse training program and culinary training programs.
You mentioned something a second ago about, making it so that people feel comfortable and being willing to ask for help. There's a perception that so many people out there are just looking for free stuff, that they're not interested in working and they just want handouts. I know from talking to you in the past, that is not the impression you have talking to people. It's actually trying to get them over that hurdle of asking for help because of a sense of pride that they might feel, and a misplaced sense of pride. Talk about that aspect of it, and some of the families that you've been able to help, some of the individuals you've been able to help.
So there is a sense of pride. There's also a sense of shame that goes along with that. And you see the look on our families, and some are walking out now, and they bring their children. And this is, no one wants to be in a situation where they're asking for help, or no one wants to be in a situation where they're struggling to put food on the table for their children. But unfortunately, people find themselves in those situations, especially given the economy that we're in now. And so what we let families know is that it's not just about the food. You know, the food is the first thing to build that foundation. Once you build a solid foundation for our families, then you can build on that foundation, including some of those life skills and workforce training programs that I talked about, especially how to manage money, how to manage time, and help families out of the situation. So for us, we're about shortening that line, ending the line, and moving families to a place of independence. And we put together a curriculum for them if they want to move out of that. But the biggest thing is our families are really struggling, and the cost of living is just extremely high in South Florida. And until something changes, we're going to see a lot more families coming to us.
All right, and finally, let's talk about how those who want to help you in this can help. Tell me about what, if somebody wants to sort of be able to provide you assistance, what do you need? Do you need volunteers? Do you need financial contributions? Do you need food contributions? What's the best way for individuals to be able to help you serve the community?
What we need are people who want to give back, who want to be part of the solution, who struggle to see when other people are struggling. We've been fortunate, and our families have been fortunate, that in South Florida there are so many people who want to get involved, so many people who don't like to see or don't want to see children going without food, or seniors eating pet food. The biggest way to get involved, or the easiest way, is to go to our website, feedingsouthflorida.org, and make a monetary donation there. That said, we absolutely cannot do what we do without the support of our volunteers. I was just at a distribution this past Sunday before Thanksgiving, and a lot of volunteers were there. We have distributions everywhere. We have our own warehouse where volunteers can come in and help put boxes together. We get almost 40,000 volunteers coming through our doors every year, and that's a whole lot of individuals that really help us with our mission, especially if they're mission-driven individuals who want to be part of the solution. That's another great way to be involved, and then also to get the youth involved, to get your places of worship involved, and your places of work involved. Those are some of the best ways to help Feeding South Florida, and more importantly, the families we serve.
We'll be right back after the break. Well, that's all the time we have today. If you have any thoughts or comments, feel free to contact me at jdefede@cbs.com. I do enjoy hearing from you. Now, we'll be back again next week. Thanks again for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.